For 7 years, the old man came to the same bench every day at exactly 4:30 p.m. Rain or shine, winter or summer, he never missed a day. He would sit for precisely 1 hour, sometimes writing in a small blue notebook, sometimes just watching. People passed by. Nobody knew why. Some kids made up wild stories about him being a spy or a ghost. But 10-year-old Zuri Campbell couldn't stop wondering about the real reason. What was so special about that one bench? Why did he sometimes smile at it like it was an old friend? Why did he sometimes wipe away tears when he thought no one was looking? Zuri had no idea that one rainy Thursday would change everything, when the man dropped his mysterious notebook and the truth began to unfold. The clock in Zuri Campbell's bedroom showed 4:25 p.m. She put down her math homework and moved to the window seat, pulling her knees up to her chest, her eyes fixed on the third bench by the duck pond in Maple Park, just across the street from her house. Right on time, an old man with a wooden cane appeared at the park entrance. "There he is," Zuri whispered to herself. Mr. Elias Reed walked, slowly but steadily, along the gravel path. He wore his usual brown hat with a small feather tucked in the band and a green coat that looked too heavy for the mild spring day. Zuri had watched him make this same trip every single day for months now, ever since her family moved into the house with the perfect view of the park. Rain or shine, hot or cold, Mr. Reed never missed a day. During winter storms, he trudged through, snow that reached his knees. On scorching summer days, sweat dripped down his wrinkled face. But he always came, always at 4:30, always to the same bench. Some kids at school called him Creepy Park Man. They made up wild stories about him. "He's counting ducks for the government," Joey Martin had said last week at lunch. "No way," replied Milo, Zuri's best friend. "My brother says he's waiting for alien signals. That's why he never misses a day." Zuri didn't believe any of those stories. There was something sad about Mr. Reed. She could see it in the way his shoulders hunched forward, like he was carrying something heavy no one else could see. Outside, Mr. Reed reached the bench and carefully dusted off the seat with a handkerchief, even though it wasn't dirty. He set his cane against the armrest and lowered himself onto the wooden slats, with a sigh Zuri couldn't hear but could imagine. From her second-floor window, Zuri had a perfect view. The old man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, blue notebook. Some days, he just sat quietly, watching people walk by. Other days, like today, he wrote in his notebook, his pencil moving slowly across the page. Zuri wondered what he was writing. A story? A letter? A list of all the things he saw in the park? "Zuri, dinner in 20 minutes, her mom called from downstairs. "Okay," Zuri shouted back, but she didn't move from her spot. In the park, a young couple walked by Mr. Reed's bench, holding hands and laughing. He looked up from his notebook and watched them pass. For just a moment, his face changed. The permanent frown lines softened, and the corners of his mouth turned up in what might have been a smile. Then, just as quickly, the smile disappeared. He scribbled something in his notebook. Mrs. Tanner from across the street passed by with her twin toddlers in a stroller. She nodded politely to Mr. Reed, but he barely seemed to notice. His eyes followed the twins, who were babbling and pointing at the ducks. He wrote something else down. Sometimes, when no one was looking, Mr. Reed would reach out and touch the back of the bench, running his fingers over something Zuri couldn't see from her window. Once, she had seen him wipe away a tear when he thought no one was watching. 7 years. That's what Zuri had learned when she asked Mrs. Garcia, who had lived on their street forever, about the old man. Oh, Elias Reed. He's been coming to that bench every day for 7 years now. Never misses a day. Poor soul. But Mrs. Garcia wouldn't say why he came, just shook her head and muttered something about terrible tragedy before changing the subject. At exactly 5:30 p.m., Mr. Reed closed his notebook and returned it to his pocket, right on schedule. He never stayed longer, never left earlier. 1 hour exactly, every day. He stood up slowly, his joints seeming to protest after sitting for so long. He picked up his cane and, with one last long look at the bench, turned and walked back along the path toward the park exit. Zuri watched until his green coat disappeared around the corner. 7 years of coming to the same bench every day. Why? What could make someone so devoted to a wooden bench in a small-town park? "Zuri! Dinner! Now, please!" Her mom's voice was more insistent this time. Coming. Zuri slid off the window seat, but her mind was still on Mr. Reed and his mysterious daily visits. At dinner, while her parents talked about work and her little brother Tommy complained about his vegetables, Zuri pushed her food around her plate. "Mom, do you know Mr. Reed? The old man who sits on the park bench every day?" she finally asked. Her mom, a nurse at Pinewood Community Hospital, looked up with surprise. "Elias Reed? I've seen him at the hospital for checkups. Why do you ask?" "I just wonder why he goes to the same bench every single day. For 7 years. Doesn't that seem weird?" Her dad shrugged. "People have their habits, Zuri. Maybe he just likes that spot." "Nobody likes a spot enough to visit it every day for 7 years, Zuri argued. "There has to be a reason." "Well, whatever his reason is, it's his business," her mom said, in her "that's the end of it" voice. Sometimes people deserve to have their secrets respected. But Zuri couldn't stop thinking about it. What was so special about that bench? Why did Mr. Reed sometimes smile at it like it was an old friend? Why did he sometimes wipe away tears when he thought no one was looking? The next day after school, Zuri rushed home and took her usual spot by the window. At 4:30 on the dot, Mr. Reed appeared. Same brown hat, same green coat, same slow, careful walk to the third bench by the duck pond. What Zuri didn't know then was that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, Mr. Reed would drop his notebook. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next day was Thursday. Rain pattered against Zuri's bedroom window as she watched the park, wondering if Mr. Reed would still come in such bad weather. The third bench by the duck pond was already slick with rainwater, droplets bouncing off the wooden slats. At 4:29, the familiar green coat appeared at the park entrance. Mr. Reed had added a clear plastic rain cover to his brown hat, and he walked more carefully than usual on the wet path. But he came. "He really never misses a day," Zuri whispered, fog forming on the window where her breath touched the glass. She watched as Mr. Reed reached the bench and pulled a small towel from his pocket to dry the seat. Once satisfied, he settled, down with his cane, and took out the blue notebook. The rain made it difficult for him to write, so today he just sat, watching the park through the downpour. A crack of thunder made Zuri jump. The storm was getting worse. Most people had left the park, rushing home to stay dry. Only Mr. Reed remained, as if the storm didn't matter. At exactly 5:30, right on time, he closed his notebook and stood to leave. But as he tucked the notebook into his coat pocket, a gust of wind blew his hat off. Mr. Reed reached for it quickly, and in that moment, the blue notebook slipped from his fingers. It fell to the ground near the bench, landing in a puddle. Mr. Reed caught his hat and placed it back on his head, not noticing that his precious notebook was no longer in his pocket. He picked up his cane and walked away, disappearing into the rainy mist. "He dropped it!" Zuri pressed her hands against the cold window glass. He doesn't know! Without thinking twice, Zuri raced downstairs, nearly colliding with her brother in the hallway. "Mom, I need to go to the park real quick," she shouted, already pulling on her yellow raincoat. "In this weather?" "Absolutely not," her mother called, from the kitchen. But Zuri had already yanked open the front door and dashed out into the rain. The cold drops stung her face as she ran across the street and into Maple Park. Her sneakers splashed through puddles, soaking her socks, but she didn't slow down. By the time she reached the third bench, she was drenched. The blue notebook lay in a puddle, its pages starting to soak up water. Zuri snatched it up and looked around frantically for Mr. Reed, but he was long gone. "I need to give this back to him," she said to herself, clutching the wet notebook to Dito, her chest. She looked in the direction Mr. Reed usually walked, but the rain made it impossible to see far. She would have to try tomorrow. Back home, Zuri faced her mother's anger for running out without permission. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, dripping water onto the welcome mat. "But Mr. Reed dropped his notebook, and I had to get it before it was ruined." Her mother's expression softened slightly. "That was kind of you, honey, but still dangerous to run out in a thunderstorm. Get changed, and we'll talk about this." Her room, Zuri carefully set the wet notebook on her desk and blotted it with a towel. The cover was soaked, but most of the pages inside were only damp around the edges. As she gently patted the pages dry, she couldn't help noticing the neat, small handwriting that filled them. "I shouldn't look," she told herself. "It's private." But the notebook was already open, and her eyes caught a line of text. Young mother, with twins, looked tired but happy. Talked to them about ducks. One baby laughed, big, toothless smile. Zuri recognized the description immediately. That was Mrs. Tanner with her twins from yesterday. Mr. Reed had been writing about the people. Who passed his bench? Curiosity overpowered her guilt. She turned the page. Old man with golden retriever. Sunshine? Third visit this week. Dog seems to be helping him smile more. Good. Another page. Teenage couple on bench near pond. First kiss? Both looked nervous, then happy. Reminded me of Lila and me so long ago. Zuri sat on her bed, carefully turning the damp pages. This wasn't what she expected at all. It wasn't a diary or a story. It was observations, detailed notes about everyone who visited the park near his bench. Some entries were just a line or two. Others filled half a page. Wedding proposal today. Young man, very nervous, dropped the ring in the grass. Young woman laughed, helped him find it, said yes. Both cried happy tears. The notes went back months, maybe years. Mr. Reed had recorded hundreds of small moments, children feeding ducks, old ladies reading books, joggers pausing for breath. Most entries included names, if he knew them, or descriptions if he didn't. All were written with surprising care and attention. Mrs. Chen practiced Tai Chi again today. Her form is improving. She waved to me for the first time. Franklin kids had ice cream cones. Little boy dropped his, cried. Big sister shared hers. Good kids. Rain today. Park mostly empty. Just me and the ducks. Quiet days are hardest. Some entries made Zuri smile. Others made her feel sad. Mr. Reed wasn't just sitting on that bench. He was watching life happen around him, recording tiny stories that most people would never notice. Near the back of the notebook, Zuri found entries that were different. They weren't observations of strangers, but letters addressed to someone named Lila. Lila, the daffodils you planted by the pond are blooming again. seventh spring without you. They're still beautiful. Lila, a little girl, watches me from her window. Now, reminds me of how you used to people watch. Wonder what she thinks of the old man on the bench? Zuri gasped. He had noticed her watching. She flipped to the most recent pages. Yesterday's entry was there. Couple in matching red jackets. Newly in love. Holding hands like they're afraid to let go. Mrs. Tanner with twins. They're getting so big. Girl still watching from window. Curious eyes, like yours were. And then, circled several times in heavy pencil marks, a final note. Anniversary tomorrow. 7 years since Lila. I'm not ready. Zuri closed the notebook, her heart pounding. 7 years. The same amount of time Mr. Reed had been coming to the bench. Who was Lila? What had happened 7 years ago? She carefully placed the now dry notebook on her desk. Tomorrow, she would go to the park at 4:30 and return it to Mr. Reed. And maybe, just maybe, find out why a lonely old man had spent 7 years watching the world from a park bench, writing down the lives of strangers in Des Point Michut, a little blue notebook. What Zuri didn't know was that tomorrow would bring another surprise. For the first time in 7 years, Elias Reed wouldn't come to his bench at all. The next day, Friday, Zuri rushed home from school. She had kept Mr. Reed's notebook in her backpack all day, careful not to let it get damaged. Twice during math class, she had sneaked peeks at it, reading more of his careful observations about park visitors. Now, as the clock ticked closer to 4:30, she sat at her window seat with the blue notebook clutched in her hands. The rain had stopped, leaving the park fresh and green. The third bench glistened with leftover raindrops, waiting for its daily visitor. 25. 4.28. 4:30. Zuri watched the park entrance, expecting to see the familiar green coat and brown hat. But no one came. He's just running late, she told herself, tapping her fingers nervously on the notebook cover. 40 Fander, 4:45. 5 Fox. The bench remained empty. Birds landed on it, then flew away. A young couple sat down for a few minutes, then moved on. But no sign of Mr. Reed. By 5:30, when he would normally be leaving, Zuri felt a strange worry growing in her stomach. In all the months she'd been watching, and according to what everyone said, Elias Reed had never missed a day at his bench. Not once in 7 years, until today. "Mom?" Zuri called, running downstairs to the kitchen where her mother was starting dinner. "Do you know where Mr. Reed lives? The bench man?" Her mother looked up from chopping carrots. "I think he's on Oakmont Street." "Why?" "He didn't come to the park today. He's never missed a day before. And I still have his notebook." Her mother's hands paused. "Never missed a day? Are you sure?" "Positive. Everyone knows that. Mrs. Garcia said he's been going there every single day for 7 years. Her mother frowned slightly. "That does seem strange, then. Especially if today is some kind of anniversary. Like you said you read in his notebook." Zuri bit her lip. "I'm worried about him." Her mother wiped her hands on a towel. "Well, I don't know his exact address, but I might know something that could help." She hesitated. "Honey, since you've already read part of his notebook, you should know that Mr. Reed has had a difficult time. He's a private person who's been through a lot of pain." "What happened to him?" Zuri asked. Her mother sighed. "It's not my story to tell, sweetheart. I know a little because I've seen his medical records at the hospital. But there are privacy rules. People deserve to keep some things to themselves. But what about Lila? Who is she? Like I said, It's not my place to share his personal history. Her mother touched Zuri's shoulder gently. Why don't you go to the park tomorrow? He might be back then, and you can return his notebook. That night, Zuri couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Mr. Reed and why he hadn't come to the bench on such an important day. She read more of the notebook by flashlight under her covers, careful not to wake her brother in the next room. The next day was Saturday. Zuri didn't have school, so she went to the park early, carrying the blue notebook in her backpack. She decided to sit on Mr. Reed's bench and wait for him. It felt strange to sit where she had only watched from a distance. The bench was older than it looked from her window, the wood smoothed by years of people sitting on it. As she ran her hand along the backrest, her fingers found a small metal plate she had never noticed before. In loving memory of Lila Reed, her laughter brightened our days. Forever in our hearts, 2017, Zuri traced the letters with her fingertip. Lila Reed, the same last name as Mr. Reed, and 2017, exactly 7 years ago. It's a memorial bench, she whispered to herself. Now things were starting to make sense. Mr. Reed came to this bench every day because it was dedicated to someone named Lila, who had died 7 years ago. But who was Lila? His wife? His daughter? And why would he spend his time watching and writing about strangers if he came here to remember Lila? Zuri waited at the bench until noon, but Mr. Reed never appeared. She returned home, disappointed and increasingly worried. He wasn't there again, she told her mother. Maybe he's not feeling well, her mother suggested. The anniversary of losing someone you love can be very hard. Can we look for his address, please? I just want to return his notebook. It seems really important to him. Her mother thought for a moment. Tell you what, let's ask Milo to help. Doesn't his mom work at the town hall? She might know Mr. Reed's address. Zuri brightened. That's a great idea. She called Milo right away, and he agreed to ask his mom. Within an hour, he called back with news. Mom says Mr. Reed lives at 743 Oakmont Street. It's the small blue house with the bird bath in the front yard. Sunday morning, Zuri convinced her mother to drive her to Mr. Reed's house. They pulled up in front of a neat little blue house with white trim. The garden looked well-tended, though not recently mowed. A stone bird bath stood in the front yard, just as Milo had described. Zuri approached the door nervously and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. She peered through the front window. The house looked clean and tidy, but there was no movement inside. He's not home, she told her mother, who waited in the car. As they were about to leave, a woman next door looked up from her gardening. Looking for Mr. Reed? She called. Zuri nodded. Yes. Do you know where he is? The woman set down her trowel and walked over to the fence. He's in the hospital, poor thing. Fell down his stairs Thursday night. Broke his hip, they say. Zuri's eyes widened. Thursday night? That's why he wasn't at the park on Friday. The neighbor nodded. I called the ambulance myself. Heard him calling for help through the window. Good thing I was home. Which hospital is he in? Zuri asked urgently. Pinewood Community, I expect. That's where they take everyone around here. Back in the car, Zuri turned to her mother. Mom, you work at Pinewood Hospital. Is Mr. Reed really there? Can we visit him? Her mother looked surprised. Elias Reed is in our hospital? I didn't know. I wasn't working yesterday. She started the car. We can't visit today, honey. Hospital rules. Only family can visit on Sundays. But he needs his notebook, and we should make sure he's okay. Does he have any family? Her mother hesitated. Not that I know of. Listen, I'll check on him during my shift tomorrow. If he's doing okay, maybe I can bring you to visit after school." That night, Zuri read the notebook one more time. The beginning entries from 7 years ago were all addressed to Lila. They were different from the later ones, more like letters than observations. "Lila, I sat on your bench today. It still doesn't feel real that you're gone." "Lila, a little girl fed the ducks today. She laughed just like you used to." Slowly, over hundreds of entries, the notebook had changed from letters to Lila into observations about strangers. But Lila's name still appeared sometimes, especially on anniversaries and holidays. Zuri closed the notebook, more determined than ever to return it to Mr. Reed, and to finally understand the story of the man on the bench. Monday afternoon crawled by like a snail climbing uphill. Zuri couldn't focus on her teacher's lesson about fractions. Her mind kept drifting to Mr. Reed, alone in a hospital bed, without his precious notebook. Did he miss writing in it? Was he worried about losing it forever? When the final bell rang, Zuri raced to her locker where Milo was waiting. "Mom's working late today," Zuri explained as they walked out of school together. "She said I could go to your house until she can pick me up after her hospital shift." Milo adjusted his backpack. "Cool. Want to play video games?" Zuri shook her head. "I have a better idea. Let's go see if we can find Mr. Reed." "The bench guy? But you said he's in the hospital." "Exactly. Pinewood Hospital is only 6 blocks from your house. We could bike there." Milo's eyes widened. "Are you serious? We can't just show up at a hospital by ourselves." "Why not? My mom works there. I've been there lots of times. But we're kids. They won't let us visit someone who's not our relative." Zuri hadn't thought of that. "We'll say he's your grandfather. We just want to return his notebook." Milo frowned. "I don't know, Zuri. That sounds like lying." "It's not really lying. It's just bending the truth a little. For a good reason." Zuri pulled the blue notebook from her backpack. "This is really important to him, Milo. You should read what's in here. He's been alone for 7 years, writing about strangers in the park because he lost someone he loved." Milo still looked doubtful, but something in Zuri's face must have convinced him. "Fine, but if we get in trouble, I'm blaming you." At Milo's house, they dropped off their school things and grabbed their bikes. The ride to Pinewood Community Hospital took less than 15 minutes. The large white building loomed ahead, with ambulances parked near the emergency entrance. They locked their bikes to a rack and walked through the main doors. The hospital smelled like cleaning products and reminded Zuri of when she broke her arm last year. At the front desk sat Mrs. Fletcher, who Zuri recognized from her mom's hospital Christmas party. "Hi, Mrs. Fletcher," Zuri said brightly. The woman looked up, surprised. "Zuri Campbell? What are you doing here, honey? Is everything okay? Your mom's on the 3rd floor today." "Everything's fine. We're here to visit my friend's grandfather, Mr. Elias Reed. Do you know what room he's in?" Mrs. Fletcher looked at Milo, then back at Zuri. "Mr. Reed? I don't think he's listed any family contacts." Milo shifted uncomfortably beside Zuri. She nudged him with her elbow. Yes," Milo stammered. "He's my grandfather. We just want to say hi and return something that belongs to him." Mrs. Fletcher looked doubtful. "Hospital policy says children under 16 need to be accompanied by an adult when visiting patients." "My mom works here," Zuri reminded her. "She knows we're coming. She's just busy with patients right now." That wasn't exactly true, but Zuri hoped her mom would understand once she explained. Mrs. Fletcher sighed. "Well, since I know you, Mr. Reed is in room 247, but make it a short visit, okay? He needs his rest." "We promise," Zuri said, already pulling Milo toward the elevators. On the second floor, they followed the signs to room 247. The door was partially open. Zuri knocked softly. "Mr. Reed, can we come in?" No answer. Zuri pushed the door open a little wider and peeked inside. An old man lay in the hospital bed, his eyes closed. He looked smaller somehow, without his green coat and brown hut. A walking frame stood beside his bed, and his leg was elevated on a pillow. "Maybe we should come back later," Milo whispered. "He's sleeping." But just then, Mr. Reed's eyes opened. He stared at them in confusion. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice raspy. Zuri stepped into the room, suddenly nervous. "I'm Zuri Campbell. I live across from Maple Park. This is my friend Milo." Mr. Reed's eyes narrowed, then widened in recognition. "You're the girl from the window, the one who watches me from across the park." Zuri felt her face grow hot. She hadn't expected him to recognize her. "Yes, I found something you dropped." She pulled the blue notebook from her pocket and held it out. "You left it at the bench when it was raining." Mr. Reed's hand trembled as he reached for the notebook. "My notebook. I thought it was lost forever." His voice broke a little. "Thank you." "I'm sorry," Zuri said quickly. "I looked inside it. I shouldn't have, but I was curious. I wanted to know why you go to that bench every day. Instead of being angry," Mr. Reed looked relieved as he clutched the notebook to his chest. "Most people wouldn't have bothered to return it. They would have thrown it away, thinking it was nothing important." "But it is important," Zuri said. "It's all your notes about people in the park. And letters to someone named Lila." The toured room grew quiet. Even the hospital sounds outside seemed to fade away. "You read those too?" Mr. Reed asked softly. Zuri nodded, afraid she had gone too far. "The bench has a plaque with her name. Was she your wife?" Before Mr. Reed could answer, the door opened wider and Zuri's mom walked in, wearing her blue hospital scrubs. "Zuri? Milo? What are you doing here? I told you I'd check on Mr. Reed, not that you should come by yourselves." "I'm sorry, Mom," Zuri began. "But I needed to return Mr. Reed's notebook. It's really important to him." Her mother looked from Zuri to Mr. Reed, who was still holding the notebook tightly. "She's right," Mr. Reed said. "This notebook means everything to me." He looked at Zuri's mother. "Claire, isn't it? From the cardiac floor?" "Yes, though I'm covering orthopedics today." She checked his chart. "How's the pain, Mr. Reed? On a scale of 1 to 10? 4, he said. "Manageable." "Mom," Zuri interrupted. "Can I stay and talk to Mr. Reed for a while? Please?" Her mother hesitated. "I need to check on other patients, and Milo should probably head home." "I can walk," Milo offered. "It's not far." "I'll call your mom first," Zuri's mother said firmly. She turned to Mr. Reed. "Would you mind some company, Mr. Reed? Zuri seems quite determined." Mr. Reed studied Zuri for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I think I'd like that. No one has asked me about Lila in a very long time." After Zuri's mom left to finish her rounds and Milo headed home, the hospital room felt quiet except for the soft beeping of machines. Zuri sat in the visitor's chair beside Mr. Reed's bed, not sure how to start. Mr. Reed broke the silence first. "So, you've been watching me from your window." Zuri's cheeks flushed. "I wasn't spying. Not really. I just noticed you going to the same bench every day at the same time. I was curious." "Curiosity isn't a bad thing," Mr. Reed said. "My Lila was curious too. Always watching people, wondering about their lives. He adjusted himself in the bed, wincing slightly. "Are you okay? Does your hip hurt?" Zuri asked. "It's not so bad. The doctors say I'll need a walker for a while, but I should heal fine." He looked down at the blue notebook in his hands. "You know, for a while there, I thought I'd never see this again. Felt like losing a piece of myself. I'm sorry I read it without asking," Zuri said. "I just wanted to understand why you go to that bench every day." Mr. Reed nodded. "And now, you know it's Lila's bench." "Was she your wife?" "Yes, for 42 years." A small smile crossed his face. "Best 42 years of my life." He reached for his wallet on the bedside table and carefully removed a worn photograph. He handed it to Zuri. In the photo, a woman with curly gray hair and bright eyes sat on the park bench, smiling at the camera. She wore a purple sweater and had a notebook on her lap. Not the blue one Zuri had found, but a similar one with a red cover. "That's my Lila, 2 weeks before she got sick." Mr. Reed's voice was soft with memory. "She loved that bench," said it had the perfect view of the duck pond and the walking path. She could watch the whole world go by from that spot. Zuri studied the photo. Lila had a kind face with laugh lines around her eyes. She looked happy sitting on the bench that would later bear her name. "Was she a writer?" Zuri asked, noticing the red notebook. Mr. Reed nodded. "She wrote children's books, published 12 of them over the years, but she also kept notebooks full of observations about people she saw in the park. She'd make up stories about their lives, where they were going, what they were thinking." He reached for a cup of water on his tray and took a small sip before continuing. "Lila always said that everyone has a story. That bench was her favorite place to collect stories. Is that why you write about people in the park? Because she did?" "Yes." Mr. Reed's eyes grew sad. 7 years ago, Lila was diagnosed with cancer, pancreatic. The doctors said 6 months, maybe less. She fought hard. But his voice trailed off. Zuri waited, not wanting to push. Near the end, when she was very weak, she asked me to take her to her bench one last time. I carried her there, wrapped in blankets. We sat together for an hour, watching people walk by. Mr. Reed's eyes glistened with tears. That day, she made me promise something. She said, "Elias, when I'm gone, I want you to keep collecting stories for me. Watch the people who come to the park. Remember their faces. Write down their little moments of joy and sadness. Keep their stories safe." He tapped the blue notebook. "So that's what I've done. Every day at 4:30, the time we used to walk to the park together. 1 hour, just like we used to spend, writing down what I see, like she used to. That's why you never miss a day," Zuri said, understanding now. "You're keeping your promise to her." "Yes, until 2 days ago, when I fell down those stupid stairs." He frowned. "First time in 7 years I've missed visiting her bench." "But why do you only watch other people?" Zuri asked. "Why don't you talk to them?" Mr. Reed was quiet for a moment. After Lila died, talking to people felt difficult. It was easier to just observe, like I was collecting stories for her. After a while, I guess I became the strange old man on the bench that everyone avoided. Zuri thought about how kids at school called him Creepy Park Man and felt ashamed. "Yesterday was your anniversary," she said. "The day you fell." 7 years since Lila died. Mr. Reed nodded. "I was planning to bring flowers to the bench. I had them all ready, but I was feeling dizzy that night, missed a step on the stairs. Next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance. He looked genuinely distressed. 7 years. I never missed a day. And then, on the most important day, "It's not your fault," Zuri said quickly. "You couldn't help it." "Still doesn't feel right." He sighed. "And now the doctors say I won't be able to go back to the bench for at least 3 weeks, maybe longer." Zuri had an idea. "What if I helped? I could go to the bench and write down what I see. I could be your eyes and ears until you're better." Mr. Reed looked surprised. "You'd do that? For a stranger?" "You're not really a stranger anymore," Zuri said. "Not after reading your notebook and hearing about Lila." He studied her face carefully. "You remind me of her, you know. That same curiosity in your eyes." Before Zuri could respond, her mother returned to the room. "Time to go, Zuri. Mr. Reed needs his rest, and you have homework." "Can I come back tomorrow?" Zuri asked, looking from her mom to Mr. Reed. Her mother hesitated. "If Mr. Reed doesn't mind, you can visit after school. For a little while." "I'd like that," Mr. Reed said. He held out the blue notebook to Zuri. "Take this. If you're serious about helping me, you'll need somewhere to write your observations." "But it's your notebook," Zuri protested. "I have others at home. And this way, I'll know you'll come back." A small smile crossed his face. "Just be careful with it." Zuri took the notebook carefully. "I promise. And I'll bring you flowers for the bench too. For your anniversary." Mr. Reed's eyes softened. "Lila would have liked you," Zuri Campbell. As they left the hospital, Zuri's mother was unusually quiet. In the car, she finally spoke. "You really care about helping Mr. Reed, don't you?" Zuri nodded, clutching the blue notebook. "He's been alone for so long, Mom. Just watching people from that bench, keeping his promise to his wife. And now he can't even do that." Her mother smiled softly. "You know, in all my years as his nurse, I've never heard Elias Reed talk so openly about Lila. Most of the staff just know him as the quiet patient who never has visitors." "He hasn't had anyone to talk to," Zuri said. "But now he has me." She opened the notebook to a blank page. "And I'm going to make sure he doesn't break his promise to Lila." That night, before bed, Zuri wrote her first entry in the blue notebook. "Man with golden retriever, Sunshine, stopped at the bench today. Dog seemed to look for someone. Maybe missing Mr. Reed? Man threw stick 5 times. Sunshine brought it back 4 times, dropped it once in the pond. Both looked happy. She hoped Mr. Reed would like it. Tomorrow after school, she would go to the bench and write more. She would become the eyes and ears for a man who had spent 7 years keeping a promise to his wife. A promise to remember that everyone has a story worth telling." The next day at school, Zuri could barely focus on her lessons. Her mind kept drifting to Mr. Reed, his story about Lila, and the responsibility of the blue notebook now tucked safely in her backpack. During lunch, she told Milo everything she had learned. "So that's why he goes to the bench every day," Milo said, impressed. "He's keeping a promise to his wife. And now, I'm helping him keep that promise while he's in the hospital." Zuri unwrapped her sandwich. "I'm going to the bench after school today. Want to come?" "I can't. I have soccer practice." Milo looked thoughtful. "But you know what would be cool? Finding one of Lila's books. Mr. Reed said she wrote children's books, right? Maybe the library has them." Zuri's eyes widened. "Milo, that's a great idea. We could surprise Mr. Reed." After school, Zuri headed straight to the Pinewood Public Library. The children's section was filled with colorful books and small chairs. Mrs. Patel, the librarian, smiled as Zuri approached her desk. "Hello, Zuri. Looking for something special today?" "Yes. Do you have any books by Lila Reed?" "She wrote children's books." Mrs. Patel's smile faded slightly. "Lila Reed? I haven't heard that name in years." She typed something into her computer. "We have 3 of her books. They were quite popular when I first started working here." She led Zuri to a shelf in the corner and pulled out a thin book with a bright cover. The Duck Who Found His Song by Lila Reed. The illustration showed a small yellow duck sitting on a park bench, looking at musical notes floating in the air. Zuri realized with a start that it was the same bench, Lila's bench, in Maple Park. "Can I check this out?" Zuri asked, already flipping through the colorful pages. "Of course." Mrs. Patel selected 2 more books from the shelf. Here are her. Others that we have: The Girl Who Collected Clouds and Stories from the Park Bench. All 3 books had illustrations of the same park bench. In the back of Stories from the Park Bench was a small photo of Lila sitting on her favorite bench, with a short biography. Lila Reed lives in Pinewood with her husband Elias. She spends her afternoons in Maple Park, where she finds inspiration for her stories by watching the world go by from her favorite bench. Zuri checked out all 3 books, carefully placing them in her backpack next to the blue notebook. Then she hurried to Maple Park, excited to sit on Lila's bench for her first official observation session. The spring afternoon was warm, with fluffy clouds drifting across the blue sky. Zuri sat down on the 3rd bench by the duck pond, Lila's bench, and opened the blue notebook to a fresh page. She wrote the date and time at the top, just as Mr. Reed always did. For the next hour, Zuri watched and wrote. She described a young mother teaching her toddler to feed the ducks, an old man walking 3 different-sized dogs who kept tangling their leashes, and 2 girls practicing cartwheels on the grass. She tried to notice the small details like Mr. Reed did. How the toddler squealed with delight when the ducks quacked. How the old man talked to each dog by name. How one of the cartwheeling girls had mismatched socks. When her watch showed 5:30, Zuri closed the notebook. She understood now why Lila, and later Mr. Reed, had enjoyed this spot so much. You could see the whole park from here, all the little moments of ordinary life unfolding like tiny stories. The next day after school, Zuri visited Mr. Reed in the hospital, bringing both the blue notebook and Lila's books. "I found these at the library," she said, placing the colorful books on his bed tray. "I thought you might like to have them here while you're recovering." Mr. Reed's eyes widened as he touched the book covers gently. "Lila's books. I have copies at home, of course, but—" His voice trailed off as he opened The Duck Who Found His Song. He smiled at the illustrations. "She based this duck on a real one that used to visit our bench. Had a crooked wing. She called him Maestro." He looked up at Zuri, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for bringing these, and for yesterday's observations." He held up the blue notebook. "I especially liked your note about Sunshine the dog looking for me. Lila would have noticed that too." Zuri beamed. "It's fun, actually, sitting there and watching people. I'm going back again today after I leave here." "You remind me of her," Mr. Reed said softly. "That same way of seeing the world." He hesitated, then reached into the drawer of his bedside table. "I want to show you something." He pulled out another notebook, older and with a worn red cover. This was one of Lila's. "I keep it with me always." Zuri accepted it carefully, as if being handed a precious treasure. Inside were pages filled with neat, looping handwriting. Lila's observations from the bench, dating back over 10 years. "Look at June 15th, 2014, Mr. Reed suggested. Zuri flipped through the pages until she found the date. There, In Lila's handwriting was an entry about a young couple with a newborn baby, visiting the park for the first time. The father looked terrified, but proud. The mother tired, but glowing. The baby slept through the entire visit. "That was you and your parents," Mr. Reed said. "Your first visit to the park." Lila noticed how carefully your father held you, like you might break. How your mother kept checking the blanket to make sure you weren't too hot or cold. Zuri stared at the entry in amazement. "Lila saw me when I was a baby? She wrote about me?" Mr. Reed nodded. "Lila noticed everyone. That's what made her special. And that's why I've kept watching all these years, to see the stories she would have seen. Like your story, Zuri, from that tiny baby to the curious girl who watches from her window." Zuri felt a lump in her throat. Somehow, through Lila's notebook and Mr. Reed's daily visits, she was connected to a woman she'd never met. "The doctors say I'm improving faster than expected," Mr. Reed said, changing the subject. "I might be able to go home next week, though I'll need physical therapy before I can walk to the park again. I'll keep going to the bench every day until—" "You can come back," Zuri promised, "and I'll bring you all my notes. I appreciate that more than you know." Mr. Reed looked at the books Zuri had brought. "In Stories from the Park Bench, there's a story about a girl who helps an old storyteller. Lila wrote that years before you were born. Somehow, she knew you'd come along one day." Zuri opened the book and found the story. It was about a girl named Stella who helps an elderly man continue telling stories when he loses his voice. Together, they create new stories that bring joy to everyone in the park. "I think Lila would be happy that her bench brought us together," Mr. Reed said. "That her stories are still being told, even after she's gone." As visiting hours ended, Zuri reluctantly said goodbye, promising to return tomorrow with new observations. On her way out, she met her mother in the hospital corridor. "How's it going with Mr. Reed?" her mom asked as they walked together toward the elevator. "Really good. He showed me one of Lila's notebooks today. She saw me when I was a baby. She wrote about me and Mom and Dad." Her mother smiled. "Small towns are like that. Our stories all connect in ways we don't always see." At the park, Zuri settled on Lila's bench, ready for another hour of observation. Today she noticed things she might have missed before. How the lamppost cast a particular shadow across the path. How the ducks had a specific order when swimming. How people's faces changed when they thought no one was watching. In the blue notebook, she wrote it all down. Not just what people did, but how they seemed to feel. The teenage boy who walked slowly, shoulders slumped, kicking at pebbles. The elderly couple who didn't speak but communicated with gentle touches on wrists and shoulders. The young woman who sat alone, reading a letter over and over, sometimes smiling, sometimes wiping away tears. Everyone has a story, Lila had believed, and now Zuri was learning to see those stories too, from the same bench where Lila had sat years ago. Somehow, it felt like completing a circle that had started long before Zuri was born. Over the next 2 weeks, Zuri developed a new after-school routine. Each day, she would visit Mr. Reed in the hospital, sharing her notebook entries from the previous day. Then she would head to Lila's bench for her daily observation hour. Mr. Reed grew stronger each day. He graduated from bed rest to a walker, making slow circles around the hospital floor with Zuri by his side. The nurses commented on how his mood had improved since Zuri started visiting. "You're good medicine," Nurse Roberts told her one afternoon. "Mr. Reed hardly spoke to anyone before you started coming." At school, Zuri's 5th grade teacher, Ms. Wilson, assigned a community service project. Each student had to volunteer with a local organization or help someone in need. You must document your service and explain how it benefits others, Ms. Wilson explained. The projects are due in 3 weeks. While other students signed up to clean the local park or visit nursing homes, Zuri knew exactly what her project would be. "I'm going to create a bench diary," she told Milo during lunch. "Not just my observations, but interviews with the people who actually sit on Lila's bench." "Like a newspaper reporter?" Milo asked, impressed. "That's way better than my litter pickup project." That afternoon, Zuri discussed her idea with Mr. Reed. "You always write about people from a distance," she explained. "But what if I actually talk to them? Ask them why they come to the park, what they're thinking about while they sit on the bench?" Mr. Reed looked thoughtful. "In 7 years, I've never spoken to the people I observe. Lila used to sometimes. She was more social than I became after losing her. Would it be breaking your promise to her if I talked to people instead of just watching them?" Mr. Reed smiled. "No, Zuri. I think Lila would love that. She always said the best stories come from asking questions." With Mr. Reed's blessing, Zuri began her interviews the next day. She created a small sign that read, "Bench, Stories Project," and placed it beside her on Lila's bench. At first, people walked by without stopping, but eventually, a woman with a small dog paused to read Zuri's sign. "What kind of project is this?" she asked. Zuri explained that she was collecting stories from people who visited the park, particularly those who sat on this specific bench. "Woody, you mind answering a few questions?" Zuri asked, her pencil poised over the blue notebook. The woman, who introduced herself as Hannah, sat down. She came to the park every Tuesday to write letters to her son, who was serving in the military overseas. "This bench has good light in the afternoon," Hannah explained, "and it's peaceful. I feel closer to him somehow when I'm writing from here." Zuri wrote down Hannah's story, asking for permission to share it with Mr. Reed and include it in her school project. Hannah agreed and even allowed Zuri to take her picture with her phone. Over the next few days, Zuri interviewed more bench sitters. She met Damon, who had proposed to his wife on that very bench 15 years earlier. Every year on their anniversary, he spent a few minutes on the bench before meeting her for dinner. "She doesn't know I still do this," he confessed with a smile. "It's my little tradition." Zuri met Vivienne, a 91-year-old woman who fed the ducks every Thursday. "My father brought me to this park when I was about your age," Vivienne told her. "That was 80 years ago. The bench wasn't here then, but the ducks were. Feeding them reminds me of him." With each interview, Zuri's notebook filled with stories. Some happy, some sad, all real. She took pictures when people allowed it, and collected small details that made each story unique. Hannah always sealed her letters with a star sticker. Damon touched his wedding ring 3 times before leaving the bench. Vivienne named each duck she fed. When Zuri shared these stories with Mr. Reed, his eyes lit up with interest. He recognized some of the regular park visitors from his years of observation, but learning their actual stories added a dimension he had only guessed at before. "You know," he said one afternoon, as Zuri read him her latest entry, "in 7 years of watching, I never knew why the Thursday duck lady, Vivienne, came so faithfully. I made up a story that she was a retired biology teacher. The truth is much better." Zuri's notebook soon became too small to hold all her interviews, so she started a separate scrapbook. She titled it The Bench Chronicles and filled it with interview notes, photos, and drawings of the people she met. For her school project, she created a special page about Lila, explaining how one woman's love of storytelling had created a legacy that continued years after her death. Meanwhile, Mr. Reed improved steadily. The doctors said he could go home. The following week, though, he would need physical therapy before he could walk to the park again. Zuri visited him each day, bringing updates from the bench and working on her scrapbook in his room. "When you're better," she said one day, while gluing a photo into the scrapbook, "we could go to the bench together. You could meet some of these people yourself." Mr. Reed was quiet for a moment. "I don't know if I can do that, Zuri. For 7 years, I've just been the silent observer, the man people avoid eye contact with. I'm not sure I remember how to talk to strangers anymore." "But you talk to me," Zuri pointed out. "And I was a stranger not that long ago." "You're different," Mr. Reed said. "You understand about Lila, about the bench. These other people? They have their own stories," Zuri said. "Just like you. That's what I'm learning from all these interviews. Everyone comes to the park with their own reasons, their own memories. Just like you do." Mr. Reed picked up Lila's Stories from the Park Bench book, which he kept on his bedside table. "In all these years, I've been keeping my promise to Lila by watching and remembering. But maybe I've been missing part of what she really loved. Connecting with people, not just observing them." He looked at Zuri's scrapbook with its collection of bench stories. "Perhaps it's time for this old man to learn something new." The day Mr. Reed was released from the hospital was sunny and warm. Zuri came with her mother to help him get settled at home. The small blue house on Oakmont Street looked exactly as it had when Zuri first visited. Except now, the lawn was overgrown and the mail had piled up on the porch. "I can mow your lawn," Zuri offered as her mother helped Mr. Reed navigate the front steps with his walker. "My dad taught me how last summer." "That's very kind," Mr. Reed said, handing her a key. "The mower's in the shed out back. But first, I want to show you something inside." The interior of Mr. Reed's house was neat and tidy, with furniture that looked like it hadn't been changed in decades. Photos of Lila decorated the walls, Lila laughing at the beach, Lila in a garden, Lila sitting at her desk writing. Mr. Reed led them to a small room off the living area. Inside was a desk, bookshelves filled with notebooks, and framed covers of children's books, Lila's books. "This was Lila's writing room," Mr. Reed explained. "I've kept it just as she left it." Zuri looked around in wonder. Dozens of notebooks lined the shelves, each one likely filled with Lila's observations and stories. On the desk sat a framed photograph of the park bench, before it became a memorial, when it was just Lila's favorite spot. "All of her park notebooks are here," Mr. Reed said, gesturing to a shelf with red-covered notebooks. 7 years' worth of observations, just like mine. And these," he pointed to blue notebooks on another shelf, "are manuscripts for books she never got to publish." "Wow," Zuri whispered, feeling like she was standing in a special kind of library. "I want you to borrow any of them that interest you," Mr. Reed said, "for your project. Lila's observations might help you understand what to look for when you're sitting on the bench." Zuri selected 2 of Lila's park notebooks. "Are you sure? These seem really personal." "I'm sure." Mr. Reed lowered himself carefully into the desk chair. "Lila didn't write for the notebooks to sit on shelves gathering dust. She wrote to remember, to connect, to tell stories. I think she'd want her words to help your project." Over the next week, Zuri split her time between interviewing bench sitters at the park, reading Lila's notebooks, and helping Mr. Reed with small tasks around his house. She mowed his lawn, brought groceries with her mom, and organized his mail. In return, he shared stories about Lila and gave advice on Zuri's growing collection of bench stories. At school, Ms. Wilson checked in on the community service projects. When Zuri explained what she was doing, her teacher was impressed. This goes beyond the assignment, Zuri. You're not just helping Mr. Reed. You're preserving local history and connecting community members. I never thought of it that way, Zuri admitted. I just wanted to help Mr. Reed keep his promise to his wife. The best projects often start with helping one person, Ms. Wilson said, but they grow into something bigger. That afternoon, Zuri had an idea. Instead of just collecting stories for her school project and Mr. Reed, what if she created something that could be shared with everyone who visited the bench? She discussed it with Mr. Reed during her daily visit. What if we created a small book about the bench, she suggested, with stories from people who sit there, photos of the park through the seasons, and maybe even some of Lila's observations? We could make copies for the library and maybe leave one in a weatherproof box near the bench. Mr. Reed considered the idea. A bench diary for everyone to share. He nodded slowly. Lila would have loved that. We could call it Stories from Lila's Bench, Zuri continued, growing excited. Like her book, but with real stories from real people. Including my story? Mr. Reed asked quietly. Zuri paused. Only if you want to share it. I think it's time, he said. 7 years is long enough to keep Lila's story to myself. The next day, Zuri brought her laptop to Mr. Reed's house. As he talked, she typed, recording his story of meeting Lila in college, their 50 years together, her love of writing and watching people, and finally, her illness and last request. The hardest part was going on without her, Mr. Reed admitted, his voice soft. The bench became my connection to her, but also my way of hiding from everyone else. I stopped talking to friends, stopped participating in life. I just watched from a distance. But now you're telling your story, Zuri pointed out. That's participating again, Mr. Reed smiled. Thanks to a curious girl who returned my notebook. As the due date for the school project approached, Zuri worked on both her assignment and the larger bench book. For school, she created a poster explaining her service project, complete with photos and quotes from bench sitters. For the bench book, she collected more stories, organized them by themes, and added illustrations. Mr. Reed contributed too, sorting through Lila's notebooks to find observations that matched the themes: families, friendship, seasons, celebrations, quiet moments. He even wrote a foreword explaining the bench's history and why Lila had loved that spot in the park. Zuri's parents helped as well. Her father took professional photographs of the bench in different lights and helped design the book layout. Her mother contacted the town council about installing a small weatherproof box near the bench where a copy could be kept for visitors to read. When presentation day arrived at school, Zuri stood before her classmates with her poster, scrapbook, and a draft of the bench book. She explained how returning a lost notebook had led to friendship with Mr. Reed, learning about Lila, and discovering that a simple park bench held countless stories. The bench is like a chapter book, she told her class. Every person who sits there adds a new page to its story. Some people come to remember someone they've lost, like Mr. Reed. Some come to feel close to someone far away, like Hannah writing to her son. Some come because they made happy memories there, like Damon proposing to his wife. But everyone who sits there becomes part of the bench's story. Ms. Wilson wiped away a tear when Zuri finished her presentation. This is what community service truly means, class, she said. Finding ways to connect people and honor their stories. After school, Zuri hurried to Mr. Reed's house to tell him about her successful presentation. When she arrived, she found him sitting on his front porch using his walker for balance. I walked to the mailbox and back today, he announced proudly. The physical therapist says I'm making excellent progress. That's great, Zuri said. Soon you'll be able to walk to the park again." Mr. Reed nodded. "Not just to observe this time. I think I'm ready to meet some of the people you've been interviewing, to become part of the bench's story again, not just a silent watcher." Zuri smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that, because there's something important happening at the bench tomorrow, and I really want you to be there." "What's happening at the bench tomorrow?" Mr. Reed asked, looking curious and slightly worried. Zuri bounced on her toes, excited to share the news. "The town council approved our request for the weatherproof box. They're installing it tomorrow at 4:30. And guess what? The mayor is coming. She wants to make it official because she loved the idea of a community story bench." Mr. Reed's eyebrows shot up. "The mayor? For a little box by a bench?" "Not just any bench," Zuri corrected. "Lila's bench. The bench that's been collecting stories for years." She sat down next to him on the porch steps. "Everyone I've interviewed is coming. Hannah, Damon, Vivian, all of them want to be there. But it won't be the same without you." Mr. Reed looked down at his walker. "I'm not sure I can make it that far yet." "My dad said he can drive you," Zuri offered quickly. "And we'll bring a portable chair so you can rest. Please say you'll come. This is all because of you and Lila." After a moment, Mr. Reed nodded. "All right, for Lila. And for you, Zuri." The next day after school, Zuri raced home to change clothes. Her mother had suggested she wear something nice for the bench ceremony. She chose her favorite yellow dress and rushed downstairs to find her parents waiting. "Is Mr. Reed ready?" she asked as they walked to the car. "Your father picked him up early," her mother explained. "They needed to get him settled before everyone arrives." When they reached Maple Park, Zuri couldn't believe her eyes. At least 30 people had gathered around Lila's bench. A small wooden box on a post had been installed next to it, with a clear plastic door that showed the book inside. The first copy of Stories from Lila's Bench, printed and bound by the local copy shop. Mr. Reed sat on a folding chair beside the bench, looking both nervous and proud. He wore a clean shirt and tie, and, Zuri noticed with a smile, his familiar brown hat with the feather. Mayor Chen was chatting with him, notebook in hand. When she saw Zuri, she waved her over. "Here's our young community organizer now." She said warmly, "Mr. Reed has been telling me about your project. What a wonderful way to bring people together." The ceremony began at exactly 4:30. The time Mr. Reed had visited the bench every day for 7 years. Mayor Chen made a short speech about community connections and the importance of shared spaces and stories. Then she invited Zuri to speak. Standing beside Lila's bench, with Mr. Reed watching, Zuri felt suddenly nervous. But when she looked at the familiar bench and the duck pond beyond, her words came naturally. "This bench belonged to Lila Reed," she began. She was a writer who loved watching people and imagining their stories. After she died, her husband kept coming here every day for 7 years, watching and writing down what he saw, keeping his promise to her. She gestured to the book in the weatherproof box. "Now, anyone who visits can read stories about this bench and the people who've sat here. And they can add their own stories too, because everyone who comes here becomes part of the bench's history." The crowd applauded, and several people wiped away tears. Mayor Chen cut a ribbon on the story box, officially opening it to the community. Afterward, people lined up to meet Mr. Reed. Some, like Hannah and Vivian, were regulars he had observed for years, but never spoken to. Others were newcomers, drawn by the ceremony. Mr. Reed shook hands, answered questions, and even laughed at a joke Damon made, a sound Zuri realized she had never heard from him before. As the crowd began to thin, Mr. Reed motioned Zuri closer. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "A thank you for everything you've done." He pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is the page I tore from my notebook, the one you noticed was missing when you first found it." Zuri had almost forgotten about the missing page. "You don't have to share it if it's private," she said. "I want to," Mr. Reed insisted. "It's time." He handed her the folded paper. "Go ahead." Just as Zuri reached for it, a sudden strong breeze swept through the park. The paper slipped from Mr. Reed's fingers and caught the wind, flying up and away. "No!" Zuri cried, jumping up to chase it. The wind carried the paper toward the duck pond. Zuri ran as fast as she could, reaching for it as it danced just beyond her fingertips. At the pond's edge, the paper began to descend toward the water. With a desperate lunge, Zuri caught it just before it touched the surface. Clutching the precious page, she carefully made her way back to Mr. Reed, who looked both relieved and amused. "That was close," he said, as Zuri handed him the paper, slightly crumpled, but dry. "What's on it?" Zuri asked. "Why did you keep it separate from the rest of the notebook?" Mr. Reed smoothed the page gently. "It's a letter Lila wrote to me a week before she died. I've carried it with me every day for 7 years." He looked up at Zuri. "But I think Lila would want you to read it now." He handed the paper back to her. "This is the real reason I've come to this bench every day. Not just to watch and write, but because of what Lila asked me to do in this letter." Zuri took the folded paper carefully. Whatever was written on it had shaped Mr. Reed's life for 7 years. With nervous fingers, she unfolded it to reveal Lila's handwriting, shakier than in her notebooks, but unmistakably hers. Zuri held the letter carefully, aware that she was touching something deeply precious to Mr. Reed. The paper felt thin and delicate, as if it had been unfolded and refolded many times over the years. Lila's handwriting wavered across the page, each letter formed with obvious effort. "My dearest Elias, when you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't spend your life grieving alone. My bench isn't just for memories, it's for living. I want you to promise me something. Watch the people who sit there, learn their stories. Then, when you're ready, share your own story with someone new. Let my bench bring you a new friend, a new beginning. That's how I'll know you're healing. All my love forever." Lila Zuri looked up from the letter, her eyes filling with tears. "She wanted you to make a new friend," she whispered. Mr. Reed nodded, his own eyes moist. "For years, I only followed the first part of her wish. I watched others and wrote down their stories, just as she asked. But I couldn't bring myself to do the second part, to share my own story, to make new connections. Until now," Zuri said. "Until you found my notebook," Mr. Reed corrected gently. "Until you cared enough to return it. Until you sat on this bench and continued Lila's work." He smiled at her. "I think she would have liked you, Zuri Campbell." Zuri carefully refolded the letter and returned it to Mr. Reed. "So that's why you tore this page out and kept it separate? Because it was too personal? I carried it with me every day," Mr. Reed explained, tucking the letter back into his pocket. "A reminder of the promise I'd only half kept. Until you came along." Zuri reached into her backpack and pulled out The Bench Chronicles, the completed collection of stories she had gathered. On the last page, she had added a photo of Lila sitting on the bench, alongside a new picture of Mr. Reed taken that very day at the ceremony. "Your story is in here too now," she said, handing him the book. "So you've kept your promise to Lila." Mr. Reed touched the pages gently. not just kept it, fulfilled it in a way I never imagined. This book, that box, all these people today. He gestured around the park. Lila would have loved seeing her bench bring so many people together. As they sat quietly, a young couple walked by and paused to look at the story box beside the bench. "What's this?" the woman asked, opening the clear door and taking out the book. "It's a collection of stories about this bench," Zuri explained. "People who've sat here, memories they've made." "Cool," the man said, flipping through the pages. "We just moved to town last week. Maybe someday our story will be in here too." "Everyone who sits here becomes part of the bench's story," Mr. Reed said, surprising Zuri by speaking up. "That's what my wife believed." The couple smiled at him before moving on, already reading the first pages of the book. Zuri looked at Mr. Reed with pride. Just a month ago, he would never have spoken to strangers. Now he was sharing Lila's philosophy with newcomers. "I understand now," Mr. Reed said softly, placing his hand on the bench, touching the memorial plate with Lila's name. "She didn't want me to come here every day to stay stuck in the past. She wanted me to find a way back to the living." The Pai'u afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park. A family of ducks waddled past the bench, heading for the pond. "Will you still come to the bench every day?" Zuri asked. "Yes," Mr. Reed said, "but not because I have to, because I want to. This bench is where I feel close to Lila, but it's also where I found my way back to connecting with people. Thanks. To you." In the distance, Zuri's parents were chatting with Mayor Chen. Other park visitors were wandering by, some stopping to look at the story box or sit briefly on the bench. "Look," Zuri pointed to a young couple sitting down on another bench nearby. "What do you think their story is?" Mr. Reed's eyes lit up with interest, the same spark Zuri had seen in Lila's eyes in her photos. "Let's find out," he said, reaching for his walker. After all, everyone has a story. As they approached the couple to introduce themselves, Zuri felt something special had come full circle. The secret of the man who visited the same bench daily had been revealed. Not a story of endless grief, but a promise of returning to life, one bench visit at a time. And now that promise had extended beyond just Mr. Reed and Zuri to the entire community, all connected by a simple wooden bench and the stories it held. Behind them, Lila's bench sat in the golden afternoon light, waiting for the next visitor, the next story, the next connection to be made. The diary in the weatherproof box would continue to grow, page by page, story by story, just as Lila would have wanted. And somewhere, Zuri was certain, Lila was smiling. That was the end of this story. Where are you listening from? If you enjoyed this heartwarming tale, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more such interesting stories. Don't forget to share with your friends and family to spread kindness and awareness. Your support helps us continue creating content that connects us all through the power of storytelling.